All right, welcome to a special episode of Field Hockey Canada One-on-One. Today, we're talking with Dani Hennig of the women's national team, who announced her retirement this month. Dani has been a mainstay on the women's national team defensive line since 2010 and has 200 international caps, making her the second most capped woman in Canadian hockey history. Dani, welcome. Congratulations. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
I think the first thing I want to do is ask you just like how you're doing right now. I'm sure it's been a whirlwind month or a couple of months probably coming to this decision, making the announcement. Can you tell me a little bit about what this experience has been like for you and just that sort of process in the last couple of months?
Yeah. Well, with COVID, obviously that sort of gave us all some downtime, and it allowed me to come home to Kelowna, which is something that I've wanted for a while, I think, just to get back here as much as possible. And with the downtime, it just gave me a lot of time to reflect and start pursuing some other things outside of hockey, which have had to been put on hold over the last number of years. So I started working and I just got into a lot of outdoor activities around here. As you said, I've been on the national team for 10 years and have played 200 games. And so I've given a lot of my life and time to pursuing this sport. And it just felt like, I think my priorities were starting to shift. And I got to that point where I realized, I still love the sport, and it's a little bit sad stepping away from it, especially being here in Kelowna where there's not as much hockey for me to do sort of as a transition. It's sort of from all to nothing. I have a lot of cool opportunities here in Kelowna, and I'm really enjoying the time being closer to friends and family from childhood. And so I sort of just slowly got to this point after seeing what hockey would look like going forward. I kind of realized that my heart is sort of here now, and I'm ready to pursue other things.
Yeah. And obviously a difficult decision, especially someone who's played so long. I can only imagine that reaching that is just challenging. But have you had teammates reaching out to you? I know, sort of now it's public, but over the last little bit when you were sort of making the internal decision and then letting your coach and teammates and close friends and family know, what has the reaction been from your friends and family, coaches? What's that been like?
It's been super supportive. I think everyone is always excited for you because they want what's best for you. And when you're excited about something and taking a new step and looking into a new adventure, they've all wished me really well. And I think, again, we'll all miss each other in different ways, and you miss them on and off the field. But Kelowna's not too far from Vancouver, so I'm hoping that I'll be down often enough and maybe get some visitors up here and be able to keep in touch, because those are, with most of the teammates, those are friendships that I hope will last a lifetime.
Yeah, and once the travel restrictions change, I'm sure you'll have tons of visitors and vice versa. So, well, you mentioned you're in Kelowna right now. Let's rewind a little bit. You're from Kelowna, not necessarily known as a hockey hotbed. Then you attend UVic. You start to get some attention. You start to get national team attention. I want to just ask you a little bit about that sort of period in your career right at the start when you're playing at University of Victoria and you're getting national team attention and you're making that transition onto the team. Do you remember the moment or any sort of stories around that time where you thought, okay, I can actually do this. I can play on the national team, and this is sort of what the future could look like. Do you remember that moment, and what was that time like for you?
Yeah, there were a few moments. I think at my first national team camp, the coach at the time, Louis Mendonca, was talking about like the Olympic qualifying procedure. And it just, I think before that, because I started hockey so late and I sort of went into UVic really green, and that was my first opportunity to train pretty much every day and even train on a water-based pitch. And so when Lewis was talking about like the Olympic qualification journey, it just sort of hit me that this is the team that could go to the Olympics, and that is something that I can pursue. And I was like, holy smokes, this, like, I hadn't really grasped that concept yet, I think, because I sort of just got invited and was like, okay, like, let's go see what this is about. And yeah, so that motivated me a lot. And then I think over the next summer or two, I played with BC provincial teams. And the one year Paul Bundy was the head coach of actually, I don't know if he was the coach or if he was just watching nationals or something. And he was an assistant coach of the women's national program at that time. And after that tournament, I had been involved in the national program a bit, just training with them at that point. He had a conversation with me and he sort of said to me, I think if you really dig into this and commit to training with the national team and work your butt off, I see you being like a consistent player within the women's national team and potentially even a starting lineup player within the next, I think it was year and a half. And so he sort of gave me this timeline of what he thought was possible for me. And I was like, okay, I can, like, I'm going to go for this. And yeah, it was actually pretty crazy because honestly, within like, yeah, a year and a half at that point was sort of the first game that I started for the national team. And it sort of just went on from there. So yeah, he was pretty dead on with his prediction. And I mean, I like to think that I contributed to that and worked really hard to get there. But yeah, so that was really cool. And that's sort of where I remember getting into the national program.
Nice. And naturally those first, couple years are about that, soaking up everything you can, learning, training, trying to secure like a starting role or getting to go on tours. Can you talk about maybe, you mentioned Lou already, you mentioned Bundy at the time, but maybe you could talk about some of your role models, your idols at the time, people you looked up to within the women's program that gave you feedback that like helped you grow into the player you are today.
Yeah. Well, it's been cool. The whole time that I've been part of the women's national program, there have been women who are sort of paving the way. When I first started, there was Steph Jameson, and at that time, she broke the record for becoming the most capped female Canadian player ever. And there were some of our other captains like Barney, Steph Nesbitt, or Hume, and Katie Baker and Tyla Flexman. And they were all sort of these women that I looked up to, and they were ones who really were pushing the boundaries in terms of fitness for the team and in creating a team mentality and creating a team culture. And that was all something that sort of, it probably was initiated before I came into the team, but those were the drivers of it when I first started. And as they retired and I gained more experience, it was something that then was tasked sort of to me and some other players within the team. And we had to continue building that culture and building upon the foundation that they had laid. And so, and then I get to play with Kate Wright, who is the highest capped female athlete for Canada ever. And yeah, she came into the teams, or came back into the team sort of when I just started. And again, she then from there on like started paving the way for me too. So there's a lot of people to look up to. And I think every person that becomes part of the program, like everyone has a role and has an impact. And I always look to all my teammates, no matter their experience level. And you look to each other for inspiration, and you can pick out like qualities and skills that you admire in all of them. And so I always try to find those and emulate them as best as I could.
Yeah, and I, one thing you mentioned was the sort of shift and transition to when you sort of became that mentor and that veteran player.
Mm-hmm.
Do you? It's hard to find a moment, but there is that sort of moment, or at least a season or so, when everyone, especially such long careers, where they go
Mm-hmm.
from being the one, trying to crawl up the ladder, trying to learn, and then all of a sudden it's switched, where you're trying to pave the way and lead and show example. Do you remember when that moment kind of was for you? And if you could pinpoint it, or if it was just sort of a time when there was a lot of roster turnover. Do you remember that shift?
Yeah, it was sort of due to a lot of roster turnover and transition, and it would have been sort of at the start of 2013, and we also had I think it wasn't until 2014 that Ian Rutledge came in, or maybe he came in 2013. I can't remember.
Right,
2013 he came in. Yeah, actually, sort of spring of 2013, I believe he came in, and it was a bunch of players had just retired after the 2020 cycle or 2012 cycle, and yeah, I was still pretty young at the time and not that experienced, but in terms of our roster, I was one of the more experienced people. And so I sort of, along with Kate and Thea, got pulled into the leadership group, and sort of had to learn as I went. And I think it helped me develop a lot as a person and as a player. And I think at times I was probably over my head a little bit, but it was sort of around then, and I was fairly young and inexperienced, but it helped me grow, and it gave me a long time to sort of grow into the role and to where I finished off in this sort of past year, I guess.
Yeah, and I like what you said earlier about no matter your teammate's age or experience level, trying to be able to learn from them. So I think that's one thing, that you showed as a leader, which was continue to growing and learning, even if you did get in a leadership position at a bit of a younger age, that you continued that trajectory of learning and growing. So I'm going to just get you to look back on your career a little bit. And I have this question broken up into two parts: on field and off field.
Okay.
Looking back on your career, can you identify one or two specific highlights? And I'm sure there's obviously dozens, but anything that jumps to mind immediately for like an on-field highlight. This could be like a personal accolade. This could be a team finish. So wherever you want to go with this one, is there something that jumps out to you that you look back on really fondly?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were a lot of big games per se, and as throughout my career, I was lucky enough to go to 3 Pan American games and 2 Commonwealth games, and multi-sport games were always huge experiences. From 2011 Pan Ams to 2019, every year we improved a spot in our finishing place, as I was part of the team. So that was pretty cool. In 2015 to win a bronze medal on home soil was hugely impactful, and that was history being made by our team. I think it was the first time in 15 years or something that the women's team had won a medal at a major event. And then in 2019, winning the silver medal. Again, that was the first time in a very long time that we had been in the final. But really, honestly, the last 2 games, the Olympic qualifier, those were some of the most fun that I've had playing hockey. And apparently I'm still a little emotional about it. It was to play at that level, and the hockey that we played was probably, the best hockey I think we as a team had played in my career, and I think individually too, I had probably like the most fun I'd ever had playing in those games, like just the level it was and where we were. And I think just the absolute confidence and that I had in our team and in my capabilities too. Like I was just, it was the right place at the right time. And we lost by like the smallest of margins, but it's at that point, it was sort of, it's, I don't know, they always talk about in sports psychology, it's not about the results necessarily. I mean, in that case, going to the Olympics, it is about the results, but the performance we put out there is something that I'll always like remember fondly.
Yeah, I mean, just from watching it, the conditions, the stakes, and obviously the quality of hockey, and then the drama down the end.
Yeah,
definitely two of the most amazing hockey games I've ever seen.
yeah.
And we'll revisit that in a few minutes. But I'm going to ask you to kind of revisit that same question, but talk about the off-field stuff. And I don't know if there's any specific stories. And again, it's tough to sum up a 10-year legendary career in a few stories, but I know the off-field, you know, whether it's tours or road trips or traveling, friendships develop. There's always so much that goes on that we as viewers of the sport don't see. And maybe you could talk about, you know, a few of those highlights as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many that it's, like you said, pretty impossible to sort of sum up. I have this interesting like time capsule of memories where I have particular songs that I'll hear and it will take me back to like a specific change room in a country around the world at like a certain time. And so it's funny. All of a sudden I hear this song and I'm like, that reminds me of Mendoza, Argentina in 2013, or like all these crazy things. And I just remember, a lot of stuff like that. And yeah, some of the funnest moments were, I think, in the change room before games, getting pumped up. Everyone has their different pre-game rituals and sort of how they are. And there's a few people on the team that are always really outgoing and dancing, and I join in a little bit and then sort of just hang out, but it was always fun just to watch the show that unfolded. And just like so many hysterical laughs when you're absolutely like exhausted, tired, and you just can't control yourself. Like the stupidest things become funny. So on like at the end of a tour or a camp and you're just like dead exhausted, I remember so many times pretty much just laying on the floor hysterically laughing at the stupidest things with some of my teammates. Or I don't know, a lot of stuff just like that. The little things are some of the things that I actually cherished the most from my time on the team.
Yeah, well, I look forward to seeing the Dani Hennig playlist for the Spotify memory playlist. If you make it public. I know it really is when you talk with a lot of athletes when they're reflecting on their careers, often it's the relationships they've made with their teammates and friends, and it's exactly like you said, the rolling around on the ground laughing that sticks out almost more so than the on-field stuff sometimes. So it's nice to hear. I'm gonna throw a few numbers at you. We addressed this at the top of the show, but you're the second most capped woman in Canadian history next to Kate. You have 200 caps to your names. You've attended, from a rough estimate, 50 plus tours tournaments while wearing the maple leaf. 18 goals. You've been a leader since what we said, 2012, 2013. These are just listing out things that you've accomplished. You know, if you rewind back to 19-year-old Dani, could you see this happening? Is this something you projected? And then as it's all wrapping up now, you know, what are some of the emotions that you're experiencing upon reflection?
I don't think I could have projected any of that. It yeah, even sounds a little crazy to me now. I think coming from where I did in hockey, I had never even sort of realized that the national team initially when I started was a path that I could pursue. And as I started, same thing as with at UVic, I came in very green. I was very raw. I was an athlete. I wouldn't have said I was a very good hockey player. And over the years, yeah, just the little bits of success and that the challenge of pushing yourself to be better every single day is something that you sort of learn to love, and it drives you and motivates you. And I think that I never knew where that could go, but as I continued on in my career, it was just, okay, I need to keep pushing. I need to get fitter. I need to get more skilled. I need to understand tactics better. And seeing your own personal growth is pretty cool. Like looking back on where I came from to where I finished off. I don't think I should have been on the national team when I first made it onto the national team. Looking at from the lens of where I am at now. But yeah, it's not something I ever would have predicted, but I'm so grateful for all that I did experience and what the growth that it pushed me to.
Yeah, that competitive drive, that, you know, the competitions, the tournaments, the making the next thing, it can be addicting and extremely rewarding. And I'm sure you're mentioning that you feel like you maybe shouldn't have in your early years. Well, whoever got you on the team made the right decision and took a good gamble, because here we are 10 years later. So
yeah, I guess so.
So your last complete playing season would have been the 2019 year. Obviously, we addressed that earlier, which is practically a whole year off competitive tournaments because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the last year you played was a truly fantastic year for the women's national team, with the silver at Pan Am's, first time in 30 years, like you were saying, and Canada's ranking surged to a decade high. What I know now you're moving on, but what do you predict for this group? What do you anticipate for this team moving forward? And do you feel good about how the team is positioned now and that you're retiring?
Yeah. I think one of the hardest parts of retiring is knowing what success is to come for this team. Yeah, you don't want to miss out. And so I'm like, oh man, I'm going to be so jealous because I know that they're going to do great things. And sort of what I said at the beginning of this, looking up to the leaders and the women who were the experienced players when I first joined the team, they started paving the way. And at that, every year we made progress with this team, and there's still a core group of players that have been around for a long time. But even with players like myself stepping away from that core group, there still is that experience of success and understanding what it takes to get to that next level that is now being passed on to all the newer players who enter. And there are so many skilled and phenomenal players, younger players, and for them to come into the team and have mentors, it immediately helps them get to that next level a lot quicker rather than the whole group slowly fighting the way up. It's there's a good group that is at a very elite level, where we're competitive with top 10 teams in the world. And when a new athlete comes in, they get pushed to rise to that level very quickly now. And yeah, I see so many great things to come for this team, and I'm so excited for them and a little bit nervous of how I'm going to feel emotionally when I see all the success that they are going to achieve.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's one thing about, alumni for all programs, is that the current program success is, depends on that type of legacy that you're talking about. And hopefully when they're off, at the World Cup, finishing in the quarterfinals or better, that you can feel like your legacy helped get them there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I understand. Just a few questions to finish up, Dani. You've touched on this a little bit, but maybe we'll get a little more specific with some guidance and advice. You're moving on, but do you have advice for young players, perhaps in their late teens, early 20s, that are just getting started in the national program or the national junior program? What would you say to them to motivate them to keep going? And I guess simultaneously, this reflection on anything you might have wanted to hear when you were about that age, and what would you sort of guide them to go for?
I think an important thing to understand is it's not easy. It takes a ton of sacrifice in a lot of different areas of your life. You're going to be sore, you're going to cry, like you're going to have good days and bad days. It challenges you, like pushing yourself to get to the next level and to be the best you can. It's not easy. And that's why not everyone does it or can do it. But it is worth it. And the gratification you get out of challenging yourself to that extent is huge. And being part of a team is the best thing in that situation, because you have this group of women who are amazingly strong and inspirational to help you get through that. And a lot of them have been through it before. And so you can rely on them and use their experiences and knowledge to help you, get to where you want to be. And so don't let the challenge discourage you, and just believe in yourself throughout it. There are going to be times where you're struggling and it's hard, like I said, but it's definitely worth it for so many reasons.
Well, hopefully a young Dani Hennig out there could hear those words. Okay, we're going to close it out. For you, what's next? Obviously Canadian amateur athletes, it's obviously different than playing professional, like a big professional sport, but you're going to be moving on into something, to the next steps. What does that look like for you? I know you talked right off the top about living in Kelowna and not actually having a ton of access to hockey.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to take a break for a while, then start playing a little bit here and there, or what does this look like for you professionally, personally, on field? What are the next steps?
Yeah. Well, again, there's not really field hockey in Kelowna, unfortunately. Sometimes there's an adult league where it's like just a dropping group and you scrimmage against each other. There's not even multiple teams on field turf. So I'm not sure how much playing I'll do in the short term, and also with COVID, nothing's happening. Of
course.
But there is high school programs here and stuff with Field Hockey BC. So I'm hoping to stay involved through coaching a little bit more. I had planned on playing on a soccer team this past summer, which was sort of my first competitive sport. And again, that fell through, but I think I might take up a second career as an amateur soccer player around town. And lots of outdoor activities. I've been getting into rock climbing quite a bit. My brother does that, and my boyfriend and I have been getting into that. Backcountry skiing. So keeping myself active, pursuing a lot of those outdoor activities that I haven't necessarily had the time to do in past years and that I really love and enjoy. So that's sort of sports. In terms of work, I've been working in Kelowna since September. I'm working for a nonprofit here, and we do outdoor recreation for people with physical and mental disabilities. We do all sorts of outdoor programs like hiking and biking and paddling. And so I'm in a role with that, helping with developing some of their programs and incorporating concepts of physical literacy into it a bit more. I'm now manager of partnerships. I got a promotion.
Congrats.
Thanks. So yeah, there's a lot of different aspects. It's a really small organization, and so everyone does a bit of everything, but it's been really cool to work with them. And for me, it brings together my passion of sort of sport and physical activity, and being able to promote that and provide access to everyone and allowing everybody to reap the benefits of outdoor activity is a cool thing to be able to support that. And so I'm really enjoying it. And yeah, it's sort of just seeing where that takes me, and enjoying a life that's a little bit like less structured around training now. And it's definitely different, but I'm enjoying it. And I think there's a lot of fun things that I'm getting to do now. So
yeah, retiring from one sport, but injecting sports into every other aspect now.
Yeah, so. Pretty much. So I'm not leaving that, I guess.
Yeah. That's all I had. Dani, thanks so much for hopping on and doing this. I don't know if there's any final comments you want to make. Truly it's been great to get to like talk and learn from you as an athlete for the last few years that I've been around, and just seeing the legacy you're going to leave with your teammates is really inspiring. So thank you.
Thanks, Kev. And yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's supported this journey. It takes a lot of support for athletes to us as athletes to do what we do. The coaches from day one, parents, family members, friends, the random fans. There's a lot of people who've inspired me along the way, and have made some of those hard days a little bit easier. And mostly my teammates too. That's probably the hardest part about leaving the team is they were my family. They are my family, a second family, and not seeing them and going to battle with them like every day is definitely a change, but I'm very excited to watch them achieve great things and stay in touch and keep those relationships in different ways. So a big thank you to everyone who's been part of this journey.
Thanks, Dani.
Thanks, Kev.